Sudan's top general declared a state of emergency, dissolved the authorities leading country's democratic transition, and announced the formation of a new government after soldiers detained civilian leaders on Monday in what activists denounced as a coup. General Abdel Fattah al-Bunaz announced in a televised address came after armed forces detained figures of the government in charge of leading the transition to the democracy since the April 2019 ouster of democratic President Omar al-Bashir. His statement came as clashes erupted in the capital Khartoum, with soldiers firing live rounds at people who took to the streets to protest against the power grab. The violence was largely centered outside the army headquarters in the capital hours after soldiers detained Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, ministers in his government, and civilian members of Sudan's ruling council, the information ministry said. Now we have in the studio our guest, an expert of international relations that will be spotlighting that particular incident that happened in Sudan. But before we introduce him properly, let's take a look at this short clip, and then we'll be right back after this short break.
إعلان حالة الطوارئ في جميع أنحاء البلاد. ثانيا التمسك الكامل والالتزام التام بما ورد في الوثيقة الدستورية الفترة الانتقالية للعام 2019 واتفاق سلام السودان الموقع في جوبا في أكتوبر من العام 2020. ثالثا تعليق العمل بالمواد 11 12 15 16 24 3 71 72 من الوثيقة الدستورية مع الالتزام التام بالاتفاقيات والمواثيق الدولية التي وقعت خلال فترة الحكومة الانتقالية.
All right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television. And we have in the studio Professor Muhammad Usman, International Relations Department, Baze University, Abuja. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Good morning.
Okay, now, can you walk us through, some of the reasons why this is happening and some of its implications?
Well, there are no reasons why this is happening, because we cannot go into the theory of military interventions in Africa any longer.
Right.
And I think that that theory has collapsed decades ago with the acceptance of democratic rule all over African countries, and especially in the sub-Saharan Africa. What we are witnessing is a relapse of lack of good governance in most of these states. We have seen 2 coups in West Africa. We are seeing another coup in Sudan. Could be a palace coup within, because the general himself was part of the agreement, and also he was part of the last military regime in which he toppled, and all the constitutional provisions in which he suspends. He has been part of the signatory of this arrangement between the military that came in, that had stiff resistance from the public and top government technocrats in Sudan, which agreement ushered in technocrats to take care of the government to transit in 2023. So whatever he's saying is like betrayal of what actually had happened between him within the military and top civilians and technocrats in which he has toppled.
So don't we see democracy under threat now?
Well, democracy had always been under threat, either from poor leadership, poverty of African states. The economy is too bad in most of these states that operate, because, of course, democratic project is expensive. We have seen it, and it's running. But it is more under threat when you have military coups here and there. But I am happy to note the public and the press also note that there is stiff resistance and protest against the latest military that had come in. So it's an aberration. Nobody is happy. No one will be happy about coups. No matter how bad a civilian regime is, it's better experience than military coups in Africa.
Now, with this reoccurrence of coups that we've seen in Africa in recent times, it doesn't look like we've made significant progress, if you look at the history of Africa, over time. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. I will accept that proposal from you, but at the same time, we have to look inwards. Even though there are external factors that make these coups possible, but until the environment and the climate is really right, before anybody can exploit the situation. It is truly, I agree that these are retrogression within the African governance, and also we ought not to be experiencing coups by now at this century.
Right.
And looking at bodies like the African Union, and this, regional blocks and all of that, what should their role be, and are they playing that role?
Well, it's commendable. The AU intervened in August on the Sudan crisis. AU came up with transitional arrangement where top civilian figures in Sudan and the military came together and agreed, signed a constitutional supreme provision that they called to transit the country into civilian. But we don't know. Out of the blues came this coup. And I think that it is the tension that had not been doused between the top civilian figures within the transition government of the former prime minister and the present leader that toppled it. There had been tension between the military and the civilian prime minister with top figures for some time now, some months ago, up till now that we have experienced this coup. And if that tension had been doused, definitely there wouldn't have been need for this. There had been called by international community, the United States and United Kingdom, to douse that tension, and they read in between the line that something could happen, could give way, and it did.
Okay. Now, talking about intervention, the U.S. issued a statement saying, with this coup happening now, Sudan risks assistance, which means they might not be able to.
In fact, they have suspended. They have suspended aid and any development that will come to Sudan, and that's true. But then, what is the lasting solution in this coup menace?
Right.
So we have to look at very transparent, accountable governments in Africa that come in the guise of democratic governance. Al-Bashir stayed so long, over 30 years, and had committed atrocities of human dimension. And of course, there are so many issues with people or presidents that stay so long in African states. You find out that as soon as they leave, even if it seems to be okay during their reign, you find definitely all is not well when they leave. You find certain transitional crisis, and who they prepare to rule will have difficulty in ruling the country, because the political system in Africa and the political transition skewed towards ethnic, regional, political arrangement. And that's not good for most of these countries, because they are all colonial hangovers. And these colonial hangovers translate to that conflict immediately when a head of state leaves that stays so long. North versus South, religiously divided countries, ethnically based politics. Those are the issues. They are the basic characteristics of the political nature of African societies. And this nature of African society has not come at a time that we accept it. These are hard times. And it has not come by accident. It came by design. It's default of the colonial hangover. When they were leaving, they really felt that most of these states should not have a very one political figure.
Exactly, which
is they will call.
Which is why, which is where my next question is leading. In terms of international politics and external forces interfering in some of these local politics and all of that. What kind of role are these while colonialists playing in this?
Unfortunately, we cannot keep blaming the colonial masters and what they left. They left us almost for half a century now, and most of these states are independent over half a century.
And are they independent really? Because that's arguable, because others will raise the issue of neo-colonialism and all of that.
That is beautiful. Nkrumah in the 50s, when Ghana was about to have independence, said to the whole world and Africa, seek ye first the political kingdom, and all else will follow. But before Nkrumah died, he realized that it is not the political kingdom that you have to seek for. If you are tied to the economic apron of the erstwhile colonial masters, you are never independent. And apparently, this has been happening. We cannot do now without heavy importation of goods and services, dependent on industries outside. We don't take decisions on our own. We are heavily indebted nations, very poor countries. You don't call yourself rich if you don't earn, and you always import, you don't export. Industries have collapsed. Almost the whole sectors in the society have collapsed. The educational sector, the health sector. Our leaders go outside looking for medical attention. The heads of states and heads of parties always run to Western countries to seek for medical attention, and then they are celebrated when they come back. I mean, what kind of countries do we run in Africa? We have serious problem in fixing Africa, and unless the older generation give way, transit, whether they like it or not, they have to give way, either by age or they will collapse themselves. Definitely
by nature.
By nature, yeah. They have to give way. So because change abhors vacuum, there has to be somebody that will take care of governance somehow, somewhere. But then we pray that hopes like this in Sudan should not be dashed. There was a renewed hope in Sudan for transition by technocratic arrangement, and it was on course till 2023. But here comes another coup. So it's bad omen in Africa. Most of these countries that are in Africa and they surround these countries that make coup here and there will have to shiver. They will have to shiver because by and large these are not issues that we have to accept.
Right.
Yeah, no matter what, we have to allow democratic project and governance to transit itself. Probably by that, when we stick to this and by and large we celebrate democracy, I think we'll have leadership that are transparent and accountable.
Now, are you confident that democracy in Africa is delivering dividends to the people? And if it's not, why is it not doing so?
Well, it depends on party and party politics. When you have countries in Africa that the democratic transition within party is not even democratic, you cannot transition itself, an election itself will have problems. The extant laws that will govern the election will have problems because figures within the country will hijack most of transition rules, governance, to godfatherism, to what they feel. So if you don't have that free flow of democratic governance where people come outwardly and elect their leaders and show that this truly is a popular election, not selection, then you have it there. Because those people that govern you must come from you. And if they come from you, the expression is that they will defend you at all times. And you will stand by them. But if it is an arrangement where a national cake is always celebrated in symbolic presentation of budgets within states in Africa, then a total failure had come. And will continue to fail. There is no reason why we will not fail if we celebrate budgeting. We celebrate budget that is not implemented. We celebrate budgets that don't serve these sectoral allocations. And when you look at all the indices of budget implementation, by the end of the year, you find out that there is total failure.
Well, many will say it seems like coups are on the rise, in Africa. I've seen one in Guinea, now in Sudan. Some will say, well, is it now becoming a trend, for African
Well, it's not going to be a trend. I always say that bad governance, fish get rotten from the head. It's not from the body or the tail. So we must have to get our leadership right. And then this vacuum that is left for leaders to have to mentor the young ones to take care of leadership, not within a locality or tribal arrangement. No, I fault that. I like to see a leader coming from the southeast mentoring my own northern elites. See a south leader with southwest. See a southwest leader with northern elites. The message will be sent to this crop of mentees that if this mentor is off, you will have to fill in a beautiful vacuum and continue with a unity. All we see is different. There are some sections of some countries, they don't even have mentors. God knows how transition takes place. If you know what I am talking about, you should understand what I mean by now.
All right, now, what are the lessons, if there are, for Nigeria in some of these experiences that we've seen in other countries like the Sudan, and where we've seen?
Well, the lesson is regional cooperation. ECOWAS will have to come out and condemn the coup in Sudan. It will affect their group solidarity, even if Sudan is not within the West Africa region. So, regional cooperation, regional rebuke, and AU has to come out also and reject this. We shouldn't wait for external reaction. Internally, even if there are reasons, we shouldn't. There are unexcusable reasons for this kind of coups to keep happening in Africa. So regional organizations like the ECOWAS, like the AU, will have to come up with strong measures. Not only always to condemn, not only always to say, take it back, bring back the, which they will not do by the end of the day. It has already happened. We have seen many examples. So, but then, let there be measures, concrete measures that coups, to attempt a coup or to think about it, must be discouraged within the military institution. They must be subjected to civilian loyalty and obedience. And especially coups like this that are not popular. While transition is on from December 2018, when we saw the problem in Sudan, to the coup that happened, to the ouster of al-Bashir, and to the transition months by months up till April 2019, and then the arrangement in August by the Transitional Council in Sudan, and then suddenly you find this. I mean, it's unacceptable to the international community.
Right.
These regions have to come together, and the heads of states need to come together to put their heads. But then they also have skeletons in their cupboards.
Right.
They cannot, with authority come out and say, don't do this, do this. Some of them have proposal to also extend their rules. So how can they go ahead and talk about another rule in another country? They are grappling with their own internal problems of homunculus dimension, that they are too eager to leave seat with much problems for others to succeed than solutions. This is what is happening in Africa.
So how do we move away from this?
I think you have to come to the class.
Watching Daybreak on Trust Television, and we've been having discussions with Professor Muhammad Usman. He is an expert of international relations here in the studio from Baze University, giving us perspectives on the recent, I would say, coup in Sudan. Now, before we went on, my co-anchor was asking the question about how do we come off this, and it also, led me into thinking about, when I mentioned the lessons, for a country like Nigeria. If you look at the history of Sudan, it has, this history of secession and all of that, where you had the breakaway from South Sudan and all of that. Now, yet we are seeing this recurrent, experience there. Does this validate or negate, the conversation about secession and
since Darfur became independent as a new state, their crisis came on leadership issue also, and they had tremendous oil resources to take care of them, and the external involvement made it messy. And the leadership, Salva Kiir, and the other guy, his deputy, became so much, it was like a personality clash. But then they came from different ethnic backgrounds. But after much conflict, they now realize that they have to come together and work together, because they have lost lives and property, and the nation had to move on. And all we hear is silent since last year, since before the COVID. And thank God the COVID also put down so many conflict-prone areas, because COVID itself came in as a threat to most of those leaders. So they ceasefire, they came to the negotiating table, and then they are on, and they are making progress in Darfur. What we are witnessing today is the conflict within Sudan, the northern part of Sudan, and then Sudan itself. That conflict has its genesis with the long-term rule of al-Bashir and his ouster, with the culmination of the protest in December 2018, which brought about hardship in Sudan. The revenue has dropped because most of the revenue that Sudan is getting, besides uranium and other materials that produce high energy and nuclear substance that Sudan export to developed countries, most of what it gains from oil has been cut off to Southern Sudan. And that also could be a reason for repositioning themselves to new realities that they met. But by and large, the Southern Sudan are doing well, the Darfur region, with the intervention of the United Nations and the peacekeeping forces on the ground, the AU and other well-meaning international communities and NGOs that have intervened in Sudan. They have brought about they have mitigated serious issues. I think Sudan will be one, because these are challenges of nationhood And as I said, that long-term leadership of our country breeds certain conflict itself.
Okay. You know, I've been meaning to ask this. Egypt, very close to Sudan, you know, had military intervention with El-Sisi, you know, emerging as the new leader. But this did not make the international community to actually cut ties with them. What could be responsible for the reaction in the situation for Sudan?
Well, Sudan had been under the tutelage of Egypt itself. And Egypt had received tremendous support from the United States, especially, and the European Union. Why? Because Egypt in the Middle East is strategic on the issue of the conflict with the Palestinian crisis and Israel. And Israel is by extension United States ally, they say, but it's like its own child. So United States will not allow Egypt to be, it's a strong country, well recognized, well established, historically rich, but what is happening within the Middle East, and especially with the Palestinian issue, Egypt will not be allowed to play so much significant role within the North African Arab states.
Okay.
Yes, look at the Arab Spring. If Egypt were to produce a leadership, Egypt will have calmed down so many, but it was engulfed itself in the Arab Spring, if you remember, the ouster of Mubarak, if you remember, and the coming of Morsi, the Brotherhood, soon after Al-Sisi came in. And if you look at all this drama and transition, and you look at it supposedly only within the spectre of politics and economy of Egypt, you are wrong. You are wrong. You have to connect it with international communities, with the support Egypt gets in defense and security from the United States, with tremendous pressure from the White House to act according to how Washington needs Egypt to act.
Well, very, very powerful thoughts there. Now, on a final thought now, what are African leaders to look out for, to avoid such happenings, within their domain?
Well, African leaders need to have good transition. And not only good transition, they need think tanks. They need the academia. They need Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies suggestions of how to come up with a country that everybody will be proud of. There are a lot of people that have knowledge, but they are not utilized because those in government don't think.
Right.
Those that think are not in government.
Right.
you have this parity. It's a very humongous gap between those that are in government. Let them allow at least people to think for them.
The thinkers.
Yes, let them bring some certain proposals, certain beautiful proposals. Some of us will just be okay with a small house with one wife, 2 children, and then, and then we keep reading and thinking for them. And we will not need the money. We are being patriotic. So there has to be the synergy between knowledge and governance. If knowledge and governance don't come together, you have serious problem because they are seriously involved and indulge in governance. And they don't have time. You must excuse them. But they must have time to make consultations with the citizens of the country, with the various stakeholders, with elders, with leaders of thought with past leaders that had tested the ground. Some of them are living up to 80-something years today. And so serious consultations is the business of governance. With the academia, with the think tanks, there has to be, because most of what I observed in the US when I was there in Boston, when I studied there as a Fulbright scholar, is the fact that most of the presidents in the White House brought academia close to them. Yeah. Science, administration, international relations. And if you look at the profile of Kissinger, the profile of former United States Secretary of States, most of them come from the academia. And they take the best from the best, and they sit down and simulate situations and find the best solution. Even Kennedy's 1962 or 64 missile crisis between US and Cuba had the input of academia. Scientists gave so many solutions to the power that the United States has today. So you cannot do without the knowledge, and then the governance gap should not be so much. You should constrict it. No matter what, you may fail, you may rise,
right,
and to El Dorado.
After all, you can never go wrong in the multitude of counselors, isn't it?
That's it.
All right then. Well, we want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts with us. We've been speaking with Professor.
Well, I must appreciate the Trust TV and how you guys have brought the Trust TV, the Trust, Daily Trust is owning this. I must say thank you. And this is my maiden edition of coming here. I've appeared in so many other media, but this is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Hope to have you next time.
Yeah, sure. At all times, I will be available.
Thank you
but
so
you will
much.
soon pay.
Okay. Well, that was Professor Muhammad Usman, an expert in international relations, professor from the Baze University. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll have you again another time.
You are welcome, sir.
Thank you.